Before we get to our interview with Victoria, and we pre-tape this interview, and I encourage everybody to check it out, especially if you're in one of the states where you know that you have an election denier on the ballot. But even if you don't know, you probably do, because the numbers on that, I think around 40 states in the country, so that's 80%. There's an election denier on the ballot for either governor, secretary of state, or attorney general. So just be aware of that and check out this interview if you can. But Biden spoke to this real concern last night, actually, at Union Station in Washington, D.C. He did not use the based lighting that he had previously that had the right wing calling him a Nazi just because of his aesthetics. I thought it was like Dark Brandon personified. Was that the origin of Dark Brandon?
No.
Oh, okay.
Dark Brandon was before that.
But that was Dark Brandon Rising.
Yeah. Yes, people, Ryan Cooper included, I think we had him on the show around the time, spoke to some people, I think, around the White House who thought that Biden officials were actually like cognizant of the meme and like embracing it.
Yes,
that was how it manifested in that speech. But I guess they've shied away from
they've
that.
shied, right. They felt they had their moment in the sun, but I mean, lean
Big
into
mistake.
it.
No one cares about the speech besides like Rich Lowry of the National Review.
Yeah, but at the same time, he said a lot of good things in this speech. In my opinion, it's too little too late, emphasizing the threat of Republicans and on democracy. So here he is talking about how this election cycle is not just about inflation or crime, the things that Republicans are focusing on, or the things that Democrats are focusing on, like abortion. It's about something more existential than that as well, and that's the democratic process in this country itself.
We must, with one overwhelming, unified voice, speak as a country and say there's no place for voter intimidation or political violence in America, whether it's directed at Democrats or Republicans. No place, period. No place ever. I speak today near Capitol Hill, near the U.S. Capitol, the Citadel of our democracy. I know there's a lot at stake in these midterm elections, from our economy to the safety of our streets, to our personal freedoms, the future of health care, Social Security, Medicare. It's all important. But we'll have our differences. We'll have our difference of opinion. And that's what it's supposed to be. But there's something else at stake. Democracy itself. I'm not the only one who sees it. Recent polls have shown that overwhelming majority of Americans believe our democracy is at risk, that our democracy is under threat. They too see that democracy is on the ballot this year, and they're deeply concerned about it. So today, I appeal to all Americans, regardless of party, to meet this moment of national and generational importance. We must vote, knowing what's at stake, and not just the policy of the moment, but institutions that have held us together as we sought a more perfect union are also at stake. We must vote knowing who we have been, what we're at risk of becoming.
All right. Well, reading it in text was a little more inspiring than hearing it. I'll say that.
I think this clip really lays bare the limitations of having a guy whose sensibilities are like Joe Biden's.
An institutionalist?
Yeah, in the sense,
because he just talked about our institutions. I vote about people vote on institutions. Don't you know, Bradley?
Of course, and norms and the mores.
Yeah.
Also, with that being said too, it's also this idea of basically saying, this should be, a maxim regardless of party. But the point is, it's not.
Yes.
The actual point is, it is not a maxim of all voters and of all elected officials and candidates.
That's the thing, why do regardless of party? It's the Republicans that are anti-democracy. Right. That is what the reality is.
We've made this point many times on the show before, but this is the fundamental weakness of trying to make this argument while you have someone like Nancy Pelosi, like the Speaker of the House of Representatives, saying we need a strong Republican Party. What a strong Republican Party looks like is Carrie Lake being the governor of Arizona.
Well,
what a strong Republican Party looks like is having someone like Christina Caramo in Michigan becoming Secretary of State and literally in 2024 refusing to certify the votes in Michigan. That's what a strong Republican Party will lead to. So this is the failure of this messaging, especially when it comes 5 days before we're supposed to vote.
Yeah, and if this party was serious about actually maintaining power, they would have coordinated their efforts with the January 6th committee when making this message, as opposed to, like, as you say, 5-6 days out, scrambling to say, well, we should remind people that, you know, the Republican Party is anti-democratic and doesn't care about the will of the
matters.
Well, he's doing this in part because of the attack, right, on Pelosi?
I think so. But at the same time, you know, then don't make the case that it's regardless of party, we should be voting in a way that upholds democracy, because the way that Republican voters feel is that, or I mean, they if you actually gave them truth serum, maybe they wouldn't say that this is the case, but they motivate themselves by saying, well, the Democrats are stealing the election and they're anti-democratic. So that's not motivating.
And with regards to the question of democracy, it's true that one party is better on democracy. The Republican Party wants to attack democracy. Democrats want to maintain democracy, but the problem is if you just maintain it, it's like a car, it breaks down. Democracy is something that you actively need to build. So it would be things like not taking no from the effing parliamentarian for an answer on legislation and things like that, because that stuff is literally the brakes on democracy.
So is the filibuster.
Exactly, the filibuster too. And so, like, these sorts of things, if you can't make a credible pitch and then hide behind these institutional anti-democracy sort of like MacGuffins.
And Matt, you've made this point before with like what happened. And listen, this is not, as we always say with this stuff, we have to talk about accountability measures in ways that are available to us, regardless of our opinion on like the carceral state. But like Janine Áñez in Bolivia, Matt's made this point before. She was charged and imprisoned for the coup she tried to mount on Evo Morales. Like, there's actual accountability. There was actual accountability for subverting democracy in that country. That doesn't exist here.
No.
There's no accountability.
Well, that would be divisive.
Right.
I mean, yeah. So, I understand that giving a speech about the attack on Paul Pelosi, that should have been the case. But this should have been a part of the messaging in the lead up. Yeah. And, you know, you can't. I think they really did not time the findings of the January 6th committee well, because one, the last kind of piece of bombshell footage that they released was footage taken by Nancy Pelosi's daughter of her behind the scenes when she knew she was being filmed, kind of, you know, being a bit afraid, but there was no real kind of ramp up or stakes that were associated with it, as opposed to what they released over the summer, which was the second-by-second timeline footage of how people were descending on the Capitol and how Trump was sparking it with his tweets and with his agitation, and the footage from body cams and seeing the mayhem and the cries of pain from the Capitol Police. Like, that would have been a hammer message. And at the same time, reminding the voters that this is the party that you would be supporting. That would have been a way to actually coordinate your political message. But instead, Democrats feel that it's beneath them to do such a thing because that would be politicizing the process. Newsflash, the process of politics is politicized because there's a part, and when you're talking about threats to democracy, it's inherently political because that one side wants to overturn democracy. So I think coordinating your messaging as a president and as a committee that's investigating the former president and his efforts to overturn the election, that's pretty small ball in compared to the stakes that we're talking about here. So I just wish that there was like less rear CYA happening right now. Like, cover your ass on inflation, Now they're suddenly blaming corporate price gouging. They should have been doing that all along. Cover your ass on the election. Now we're going to talk about the Republican threats to democracy, barely saying Republican at all in the way that you're framing it. Like,
but it's like people like to talk about the like incompetence, but it's like, why were we so late to blame price gouging? It's because of the donor class. Like,
Yeah.
it's because these parties, like, I think staffers would be ready to. I mean, Warren Gunnels, for instance, was always Bernie's guy was always saying that, but there's a resistance to messaging that way because, like, it's uncouth. it's from below, and that's not the orientation of the political leadership of the Democratic Party.
and they also have a game plan that is, it hasn't been updated in 30 years, and it all involves running the ball and playing conservatively on offense and then playing prevent defense. And that's what they did the entire time with abortion.
And saying mega, ultra, mega, uber, mega.
Well, don't worry. But first, they poll tested it with consultants for 2 years.
You know,
so.
Rich Lowry is sort of, he did get the opposite message from the speech. He says, so Biden is not going to mention that Paul Pelosi attacker was seriously mentally ill and instead connect his heinous act to January 6th. How tawdry and dishonest, although not unexpected. And I'll just say, you think none of the Jan 6 people had mental illness? Right? Like, the thing about that was the coincidence of Republican propaganda, agitation ahead of an election, and the mental illness that is untreated because we underinvest in people's mental health in this country, in part because of the Republican Party doesn't want to do anything about that. So, like, that's a very false distinction to make.